Now, with coverage you trust, this is 10 News Conference.
There's a debate raging in Barrington over affordable housing. A proposal to develop the Solms Road Nursery into affordable housing units is not going over in a big way with many of Barrington's residents. The debate in Barrington is just one example of the long-running issue with affordable housing and opposition from some residents. Good morning, I'm Jim Chericani, along with our political reporter Bill Rapley. Our guests this morning on 10 News Conference are Sager Speakman, the president of the Barrington Town Council, and Gary Morse, a retired business consultant who has a different point of view on this affordable housing in Barrington issue. Thanks for joining us this morning. So why don't we let the audience know your positions, both of your positions on this proposal to build the affordable housing at the Solms Nursery point. June, why don't you go first?
Well, my position is that it's the job of the town council to implement the comprehensive plan, and of which the housing plan is an element. If this proposal is consistent with those documents, then the town council is obliged to implement.
Okay. Mr.
plan.
Morse, is the town council obliged to implement the affordable housing?
Yes, I do agree with that. However, I do believe it also has to be in conformance with the law, and therein lies the difference between June's opinion and mine, is that we are not necessarily following what the law dictates.
Now, your issue in part is because of what would in effect be a tax subsidy for the developers of this property versus other residents in Barrington?
I think it's more global than that. The issues, and I'm probably jumping far ahead here, but one of the issues that is not talked about is the issue of why is Woonsocket, the city of Woonsocket, on the edge of financial ruin at this point in time. And many in the news industry have reported that it's a matter of the school budget. Well, if you actually start to peel back the onion, what you find is there's almost a decade worth of HUD-sponsored expansion in the city of Woonsocket for affordable housing beyond what the city could actually support. And at this point in time, we've reached what many experts call the nonlinear tipping point, where recovery from those policies is almost impossible. And in Woonsocket,
well, the pensions, the unfunded pension liability in Woonsocket is probably the primary reason. I think most people would agree is probably the primary reason why it's on the edge of financial ruin.
I disagree with that.
Really?
I think it goes beyond that. And it's a combination of many things, and this is where I draw the line.
Well, let's get back to Barrington for a minute.
Yes.
You were talking about this global issue. Let's get back to Barrington. You said it has to be in conformance in the law. In your opinion, it's not conforming to the law. What's the law in your opinion, and why is it not in conformance with that?
A few weeks ago, there was a decision by the United States Supreme Court in the Coons versus St. Johns River Water Management District. And what the Supreme Court ruled in that case, and the elements were almost identical here. We had a Water Resources Act, we had state Supreme Court decisions, and we had state agencies charged with implementing the Water Resources Act. And what the Supreme Court said was that the Water Resource District, the St. Johns River Water Resource District, while they had the power to implement these good legislative objectives for water management, that they actually had extended it to the point of almost extortion, and they used the word extortionate throughout. And what the Supreme Court said is there has to be, these state mandates, the states have to step back and look at whether or not the requirements, the exactions as they call them, are actually consistent with what is there in the law.
Well, June, what is your opinion of what he just said?
Well, that's a new argument from Mr. Morse. Since the Supreme Court decision, you've made a number of other legal arguments about our position.
Are you a lawyer, by the way, just to clear it up for the audience?
No, I'm not.
Neither am I.
So this is your So this is your opinion of what that law says.
A personal opinion, yes.
Okay.
And it may in fact be that the Rhode Island low and moderate income housing law is unconstitutional, but no one has ruled on that, and it's certainly not the job of the Barrington Town Council to apply Supreme Court decisions to our practice. So we work with the law as the state of Rhode Island has passed it, and we implement that law. And again, if someone somewhere tells us that the Supreme Court decision applies to Barrington, then We will follow that guidance, but it's not our job to implement that.
So the way I understand it, if these affordable housing units get built at Solom's nursery
Right.
area, that they can only be taxed at 8%. Is that actually the proper way to say that?
Well, that's a matter
8% of the
dispute.
rent?
That's a matter of dispute. The law is clear that if it's rehab housing, then the 8% of the annual rental income is what
But
it's
this will be
taxed. For
new.
new housing, the law is not clear, and Rhode Island Housing is not clear on that. And
Well, what do you think
I've
the tax
seen,
rate should be?
Well, I think
If it's new housing?
we've yet to be asked that question by the developer.
Okay,
and
I'm
at
asking the question,
Yeah,
what do you
well,
think it should be?
I don't have a position on that. I'd like the developer to come to us with a proposal with
Mr.
regard to
Morse,
their
what
tax.
do you think it should be?
Well, I think you can read the law, even a layperson can read the law, and it's absolutely clear that if you apply even a modicum amount of logic to what the law actually says, even the layperson can walk away with a clear understanding of what the law says. And it's clear that it has to be rehabbed property in order to be qualifying for that 8% tax.
Is this going to make it financially difficult for the developer if they have to pay a full tax?
And well, they won't pay a full tax. At some point, somewhere along the line, they will have to have some tax relief from the town of Barrington.
Why should they get tax relief?
Well, they need it in order for the program to be sustainable, right? They can't raise rents when taxes go up, right?
Now,
or when other expenditures go up. So communities across.
so does that mean the rest of the Barrington residents, and disclosure, I am one,
As am I, as is he.
do the rest of Barrington residents then have to subsidize the services to this new neighborhood that's going to be built?
Well, the rest, yes. The other Barrington taxpayers will be paying more than this developer per value, except again, the developer can't charge market rents. So it's complicated, but Barrington taxpayers subsidize veterans, they subsidize seniors, they subsidize people of modest incomes. So we have lots of programs in place, as do other communities.
And there are people in Barrington of modest income. Do they get first crack at affordable housing in Barrington?
No, that's against state law. You can't give preference to affordable housing developments that are subsidized with state funds or federal funds. You can't give local preference.
Mr. Morse, as you know, each city and town in the state has to have a certain amount of affordable housing in it. You agree with that, right?
Well, the law says that, whether or
Right.
not it's actually
Well, that's what the law says.
That's what the law says.
Right, like you just said, lay people can read the law. That law's pretty clear. Each city and town has to have a certain amount of affordable housing.
10%.
By the law, but how many do?
Well, okay.
Right,
let me-
a lot of them don't, but I'm just saying that's what the law says.
What the law says is two things. The law says there has to be a comprehensive plan that addresses that affordable housing objective, and there have to be zoning ordinances that don't put a roadblock. But the law actually doesn't say that any particular town must have affordable housing. What it says is that it is a goal. Now, the two mandates taken together collectively, obviously people are going to use those laws and they're going to put in
Right.
affordable
Do
housing.
you think Barrington should have any affordable housing?
I think the time has come when these issues of home ownership and rentals have to be addressed, but they have to be addressed realistically. It can't be you pass a law and suddenly you start opening the floodgates of any developer who wants to come in and plunk down a project in any part of the town that they so choose. And that's where I have a problem.
You're shaking.
Well, that's
your
not
head.
what's happening, though. This is a private developer, nonprofit, who came in and purchased a parcel from a private seller. And that's the way real estate transactions go all the time. So this is not something that the town engineered. It's consistent with the town's planning documents, which is why this parcel can be developed in this manner. But it's not something that the town can stop. It's because it's a private transaction.
We've got to take a break. Our guests today are, is it Gary Morse? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Gary Morse, a retired businessman from Barrington, and June Sager Speakman, the Barrington Town Council president. We'll continue right after this.
Does it, so,
Is there any other affordable? Welcome back to 10 News Conference. We're speaking with June Sager Speakman, the president of the Barrington Town Council, and Gary Morse, a retired business consultant from Barrington, about the affordable housing issue. So I want to get back to this, the need or the goal to have affordable housing in a town or city. In this case, we're talking about Barrington. How many affordable housing units do you have right now in Barrington, June?
160.
160. And what do you feel you have to have?
Well, we don't feel we have to have, it's the state. The state mandates that all communities move towards 10% of their housing stock. So that would be 660 units.
When it says, but as Gary was saying before the break, that was a goal and not a mandate.
Right.
So if it's not a mandate, how can the state enforce it? I'm a little confused about this.
Mm-hmm. The way enforcement works is if a developer comes into the town and attempts to build affordable housing and it's rejected by the planning board, then it will be appealed to the state. And at that point, the town loses any control that it has over the dimensions and the number of units.
Has anybody challenged that law? The law that says the state can come in and then go ahead and build the affordable housing the way the developer does and not the way the town wants it? On
constitutional grounds, no, I don't believe there's been any challenge at that level.
Do you have is there a consensus on what affordable housing is?
Well, the law defines what it is.
So
what is it? Because I'm a little confused about what it is.
I paid less for my house than the houses that are affordable housing that can't be sold on the Wampanoag Trail.
Yeah, it's a lot depends on the funding source. So part of it depends on the person who's moving into the housing and what they can afford to pay. 60% of area median income, 80%, 100%, 120%. And depending on the funding stream, that's what you can sell the house for or rent it for. And then there are the restrictions that it has to be a 30-year deed restriction, which means it can't be sold at a higher price than it was built for. And there has to be some kind of municipal subsidy, taxes, grants, something like that.
There has to be a subsidy.
Right. So it's not just the cost of the house.
So if someone's going to build a development, like this private developer is going to, or intends to build here at this Soham's nursery area, and they're building, do you know what they propose to build?
55 units.
And do you know what the price would be?
It's rentals.
Are these condos or these homes?
These are rentals.
These are rentals?
These are apartments, yes.
For 30 years.
And do you know what the rent would be?
In the 600s, I believe. Again, it depends on the financing stream and what that requires, and it depends on the income of the applicant.
So if the unit is $600 a month, and a person goes to rent a place there and says, I can only afford $400 a month, do they have to rent to that person?
Well, that would depend. This is East Bay Community Development Corporation is the developer, and they have their own internal set of rules and of vetting that they provide.
It just seems very arbitrary to me, or am I just missing something?
Well, the goal is to provide housing for people that might not normally be able to afford it, which I agree, there's a need for that.
Right.
It is clearly a question of implementation. And the question of, is this right for Barrington? The law actually specifies that these are to serve local needs. And whether or not there is actually a local need for that kind of project is unclear. There's absolutely no evidence that there is a need for this kind of project. And in fact, the statistics show out that in the Sweetbriar project, there's almost no Barrington residents who rent.
June, as you know, Barrington is known widely as a very wealthy community. And I'm sure not everybody is wealthy in the community, but it's known as this very high-end wealthy community, probably the most wealthy community in the state. So are there people in Barrington that need these new additional units of affordable housing when you say you already have affordable housing in Barrington?
Well, all of the people in Barrington are living somewhere. Whether it's something they can afford or not, we don't know. But the purpose of the law that was passed in 2004 was to spread all over the state the opportunities to live in housing that people of modest means could afford. So this was to welcome into Barrington people who may have grown up there but are now police officers, school teachers, cannot afford to come back into the community that they grew up in because they've been priced out of the market. And remember, the law was passed when the housing was at its peak, and there was very little housing across the state for people of modest means.
I imagine some people would like to move into Barrington or have the opportunity to move to Barrington just because of the educational system.
Right.
Which in turn would be subsidized by the Barrington taxpayers because they're not going to be paying the same taxes as a Barrington resident that can afford it. Is that part of the deal here? Is that what the point of affordable housing is?
Well, that's one of the issues that I've asked to have reviewed is state law mandates that the town council can only appropriate tax dollars for certain things, and affordable housing is not in that list. There are limits to what the town council is allowed to actually go out and take a vote on, and if this were to serve the poor, and by poor, the town has already received a definition of what poor means, and that's at the federal poverty level, and that was by our own town solicitor. These are not units that are serving people at the federal poverty level. They are considered workforce housing, and families can be earning up to $70,000 a year to be considered for.
Is that true?
That's true. Yes, that is.
Well, $70,000 a year in this day and age is not, you're not wealthy by any means by making $70,000 a year, but I don't think most people would consider that poor.
Right. That's right.
Right.
But it depends on the housing unit that you're talking about. It's very complicated in terms of, again, how the funding sources move towards the particular development. That sets what the minimum rents or the sales price can be, and it sets the income class for the people who are qualified. So it really does depend on where the developer is getting the funding. And these are nonprofit developers that we're talking about primarily.
So if they build these units at the Soames nursery area, is it possible that people making $70,000 a year are going to be allowed to move in there and get subsidized rent?
Not for these units.
Not for these
No.
units. What
Not
would
for
be
these
the income
apartments.
level? Do you have any idea?
It's 60% of area median income.
And what is
and
that?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know.
Is
the
the
median
area
income.
if
in
it's
Barrington is
80%.
probably pretty high, isn't it?
I think it's 80%.
And again, a
for
lot
most
depends
of
on the funding. They don't have their financing yet. So what the income class that they can rent to depends on the funding source, which they have not yet accomplished. They haven't, right? Would you agree with that? They haven't nailed down their funding source yet for this project?
They have identified funding sources, but
Right.
haven't nailed it down.
Exactly.
All right, we got to take another break. We're talking with Gary Morse and June Sager Speakman. 10 News Conference will continue right after this.
By the way,
You can watch this program again on our website, turnto10.com. We also have an archive of past programs. Click on Politics.
Welcome back to 10 News Conference. We're talking with June Sager Speakman, the president of the Barrington Town Council, and Gary Morse, a retired business consultant from Barrington, about the affordable housing issue in Barrington. You were talking right before the break, before we came back on camera, about rolling out the red carpet for these developers of affordable housing. What do you mean by that?
well, tax breaks for one, property tax breaks. Give you an example, the average annual property tax bill for a residency, one unit at the Sweetbriar complex, is $745 a year annually. Now, for a person living in a modest home in Barrington, their property tax bill, even at the $200,000 to $250,000 level, is going to be about $3,000 a year. So contrast $745 with $3,000.
More than that. I mean, my house, I'm paying a lot. I'm paying
Right.
closer to $5,500 a year for a house that's worth less than $200,000.
June, is that accurate? Rolling out the red carpet for
No,
developers?
it's not,
to
we're
make
not
a
rolling
bundle
out.
of money?
No, we're implementing state law. That is what we're doing, and we're required to do that. I took an oath when I was sworn into town council to implement state law, and if we do not implement state law, we will lose at the state level when the developer takes us to court. It happened with Sweetbriar, and it will happen again.
Do you
But
think-
June, I mean, are you not also an advocate for? I mean, didn't you receive an award from Rhode Island Housing?
I did,
And so
yes.
you are more than just following the law, aren't
no,
you?
I'm not. I've spent 10 years on the council trying to implement state law in a way that's consistent with the needs of the residents of Barrington and the neighborhoods.
But you also want to see. Did you say that? I don't know if this is a misquote. This is more people from Pawtucket into Barrington through affordable housing, like the Sweetbriar thing, or the Solms Nursery thing.
No,
But
I
you
never-
like, what'd you get an award for?
I got an award for doing what I just said, for implementing this law in a way that works for the residents of Barrington, right? And that keeps us out of court. With Sweetbriar, we were in court. We spent tens of thousands of municipal taxpayer dollars to fight a development that is now there and is a very successful development, to answer your question. And the state court defeated or ruled against the town of Barrington in that case. I do not want that to happen again.
So what's your objection to the whole idea of affordable housing in Barrington?
Well, affordable housing is something that for local needs, serving local needs. The question is whether or not it should be built and subsidized as a mechanism to build to expand the population of Barrington, and that's exactly what the state law is proposing now. This is a production mandate that is solely to expand population.
That's not true. That's not true. It can be done through rehab as well, but that's very difficult.
Yeah, but you're
We've
putting a
been
lot more
trying-
units in this place.
That's right. But again, that's a private nonprofit developer that
Expanding
proposed to do
population.
that. That's correct, but it can be done in other ways. It's just that developers have not chosen the rehab route. They've chosen the new construction route.
Because it doesn't make money for them?
Well, no, it can make money. We do have a small development going in with 2 affordable units and 3 market rate houses, and we would love to see more of those. That is by far the preferred position of the council and the housing board, is to have 1 by 1 all over town. But that's not what the private developers, nonprofit developers have chosen to do.
So what is the status of this project right now?
It's before the planning board,
Yep.
and they are in the process actually of rendering their decision. They're right in the middle of that process.
And Mr. Morse, if they render a decision that allows this to go forward, are you and others going to take legal action to try to block it?
No, this is something that, as June points out, is state law. My point is that we should not follow up. The developer actually wrote their application, and in the application said that the town will, and I use the word, that's their word, the town will provide the tax abatements. And this is the abatement that gives them a $745 a year annual property tax bill per unit. And what I'm saying is the town should absolutely not allow that. And in an earlier meeting on the project, town attorney said that the town was precluded from even considering financial viability of these projects, that it had to go through, even if the project would fail financially, that the town had to approve it. And this became a little bit of a contention of mine, that you can't be approving projects that have no financial viability. And the issues of tax abatement should be settled right up front, not at the end of the project as it was done with Sweetbriar.
Well, June, is that true, that you have to build this project even though it may not be financially viable?
Well, that's up to the developer. The developer has to determine whether or not this is viable for them. When they go out for their financing, they have to demonstrate to the people, it's financed primarily through tax credits, they have to demonstrate to the people who run that program that it's viable. Part of that viability is a tax deal with the town, which doesn't necessarily have to be an 8%. There's a development in Tiverton that has a different package of incentives, so that's for the developer to work out with the town. And we haven't gotten to that part of the conversation yet.
Well, it seems you're going to have to get to that part of the conversation in planning board stage, right?
No, not at the planning board. That's a council decision.
That's
the
a council
the
decision.
planning board talks about the physical layout, and we
Well,
talk
you're the
about
president of the council. If it gets to that stage, what do you think you're going to recommend for a tax rate?
It depends on what they bring to us, right?
The developer, you mean.
It's up to the developer to come to us with a
You
proposal.
say, here's what we need for a tax abatement?
That's right. And then we can say, no, not that. How about something else?
And this is what I'm saying is absolutely illegal, unconstitutional.
How could it
You
be
cannot-
illegal? Towns do
because
it across the state.
Towns are equally, the problem is...
All
you
these
because
towns
we
are acting in
challenge
an
If
illegal
it's so
way?
strong that it's unconstitutional,
Yes.
you have a remedy for that. You can get a lawyer and you can file a suit against the town of Barrington and this law and test the constitutionality of the law at the state Supreme Court.
That's not to say that that won't ultimately
Well, that's what I asked
be
you
done.
before. Do you intend to take some legal
No,
action?
I think it's proper to try and exhaust every possible avenue that you can to resolve this at the town level. I
But how
think
will
we
you-
should.
how
we
can
got
you-
like 20 seconds
How
left.
can you say no to their request for tax abatement if you need to get affordable housing into town?
We've got about 15
That's a
seconds.
good question. And my guess, I don't think we should say no. We don't need necessarily to do an 8% of rent. We can do some other. But it is the town's obligation, according to state law, to help get to this goal.
And we're out of time. Thanks. Thanks for June, Sager Speakman, and Gary Morse from Barrington. 10 News Conference will continue next Sunday. Thanks for watching this edition.